Hello, and welcome to the Book Circle Presents 2025 Christmas Special. Let's start with something traditional. A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Moore. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick I knew in a moment he must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name, on Dasher, on Dancer, now Prancer, now Vixen, now Comet, now Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so to the housetops the courser they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry, his droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly, then shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying a finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." And now something from another time and place, though not very distant in time, really. Well, the poet is about the same time, the poem is not. Eddi's Service by Rudyard Kipling. Eddi, priest of St. Wilfrid, in his chapel at Manhood End, ordered a midnight service for such as cared to attend. But the Saxons were keeping Christmas at the night as stormy as well. Nobody came to service, though Eddi rang the bell. "Wicked weather for walking," said Eddi of Manhood End, "but I must go on with the service for such as care to attend." The altar lamps were lighted. An old marsh donkey came, bold as a guest invited, and stared at the guttering flame. The storm beat on at the windows, the water splashed on the floor, and a wet, yoke-weary bullock pushed in through the open door. "How do I know what is greatest? How do I know what is least? That is my Father's business," said Eddi, Wilfrid's priest. "But for you're gathered together, listen to me and attend. I bring good news, my brethren," said Eddi of Manhood End. And he told the ox of a manger and a stall in Bethlehem, and he spoke to the ass of a rider that rode to Jerusalem. They steamed and dripped in the chancel, they listened and never stirred, while just as though they were bishops, Eddi preached them the word. Till the gale blew off of the marshes, and the windows showed the day, and the ox and the ass together wheeled and clattered away. And when the Saxons mocked him, said Eddi of Manhood End, "I dare not shut his chapel to such as care to attend." The Turn of the Tide by C.S. Lewis. Breathless was the air over Bethlehem, black and bare the fields, hard as granite were the clods, hedges stiff with ice, the sedge and the vice of the ponds like little iron rods. The deathly stillness spread from Bethlehem. It was shed wider each moment on the land. Through rampart and wall, into camp and into hall, stole the hush. All tongues were at a stand. Travelers at their beer in taverns turned to hear the landlord. That oracle was dumb. At the procurator's feast, a jocular freedman ceased his story and gaped. All were glum. Then the silence flowed forth to the islands in the north, and it smoothed the unquiet river bars, and leveled out the waves from their reveling, and paved the sea with cold reflected stars. Where Caesar sat and signed at ease on Palatine, without anger, the signatures of death, there stole into his room and on his soul a gloom, till he paused in his work and held his breath. Then on to Carthage and the Gauls, to Parthia and the falls of Nile, to Mount Amarna it crept. The romp and rage of beasts in swamp and forest ceased. The jungle grew still as if it slept. So it ran about the girth of the planet. From the earth the signal, the warning, went out, away, beyond the air. Her neighbors were aware of change. They were troubled with doubt. Salamanders in the sun, who brandish as they run tails like the Americas in size, were stunned by it, and dazed, wondering, they gazed up at earth, misgiving in their eyes. In houses and signs the Uziarchs divine grew pale and questioned what it meant. Great galactic lords stood back to back with swords half drawn, awaiting the event. And a whisper among them passed, "Is this perhaps the last of our story, of the glories of our crown, the entropy worked out, the central redoubt abandoned, the world spring running down?" Then they could speak no more. Weakness overbore even them. They were as flies in a web, in lethargy stone dumb. The death had almost come, and the tide lay motionless at ebb. Like a stab at that moment, over crab and bowman, over maiden and lion, came the shock of returning life, the start, the burning pang at heart, setting galaxies to tingle and rock. The lords dared to breathe, swords went into sheaths, a rustling, a relaxing began. With rumor and noise of the resuming joys, along the nerves of the universe it ran. Then, pulsing into space with delicate dulcet pace, came a music infinitely small, but clear, and it swelled and drew nearer till it held all worlds in the sharpness of its call. And now, divinely deep, even louder, with a leap and quiver of inebriating sound, the vibrant dithyramb shook Libra and the ram, the brains of Aquarius spun round. Such a note as neither throne nor potentate had known since the word created the abyss. But this time it was changed in a mystery, estranged, a paradox, an ambiguous bliss. Heaven danced to it and burned. Such answer was returned to the hush, the favate, the fear that earth had sent out. Revel, mirth, and shout descended to her, sphere below sphere, till Saturn laughed and lost his ladder's frost, and his beard Niagara-like unfroze. The monsters in the sun rejoiced. The inconstant one, the unwedded moon, forgot her woes. A shiver of rebirth and deliverance round the earth went gliding. Her bonds were released. Into broken light the breeze once more awoke the seas. In the forest it waked every beast. Capropods fell to dance from Taprobane to France, leprechauns from Down to Labrador. In his green Asian dell the phoenix from his shell burst forth and was the phoenix once more. So death lay in a rest, but at Bethlehem the blessed nothing greater could be heard than the sighing wind on the thorn, the cry of one newborn, and cattle in a stable as they stirred. Also by C.S. Lewis, the Nativity. Among the oxen, like an ox I'm slow, I see a glory in the stable grow, which with the ox dullness might at length give me an ox's strength. Among the asses, stubborn I as they, I see my Saviour where I looked for hay. So may my beast-like folly learn at least the patience of a beast. Among the sheep, I like a sheep have strayed. I watch the manger where my Lord is laid. Oh, that my buying nature would win thence some woolly innocence. And now, by Lewis's friend, J.R.R. Tolkien, Noel. Grim was the world and grey last night, the moon and stars were fled, the hall was dark without song or light, the fires were fallen dead, the wind in the trees was like to the sea, and over the mountain's teeth it whistled bitter cold and free, as a sword leapt from its sheath. The Lord of Snows upreared his head, his mantle long and pale, upon the bitter blast was spread and hung o'er hill and dale. The world was blind, the boughs were bent, all ways and paths were wild. Then the veil of cloud apart was rent, and here was born a child. The ancient dome of heaven sheer was pricked with distant light. A star came shining white and clear alone above the night. In the dale of dark, in that hour of birth, one voice of a sudden rang. Then all the bells in heaven and earth together at midnight sang. Mary sang in this world below. They heard her song arise o'er mist and mountains of snow to the walls of paradise. And the tongue of many bells was stirred in heaven's towers to ring, when the voice of mortal maid was heard that was mother of heaven's king. Glad is the world and fair this night, with stars about its head, and the hall is filled with laughter and light, and fires are burning red. The bells of paradise now ring with bells of Christendom, and Gloria, Gloria we will sing, that God on earth is come. Ring Out Wild Bells by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Ring out, wild bells, to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light, the year is dying in the night. Ring out, wild bells, and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new, ring, happy bells, across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind, for those that here we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor, ring in the redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life, sweet purer manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right, ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease, ring out the narrowing lust of gold, ring out the 1,000 wars of old, ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land, ring in the Christ that is to be. And now a little story rather than a poem. The Shop of Ghosts by G.K. Chesterton. Nearly all the best and most precious things in the universe you can get for a halfpenny. I make exception, of course, for the sun, the moon, the earth, people, thunderstorms, and such trifles. You can get them for nothing. But the general principle will at once be apparent. In the street behind me, for instance, you can now get a ride on an electric tram for a halfpenny. To be on an electric tram is to be on a flying castle in a fairy tale. You can get quite a large number of brightly colored sweets for a halfpenny. Also, you can get the chance of reading this article for a halfpenny, along, of course, with other and irrelevant matter. But if you want to see what a vast and bewildering array of valuable things you can get at a halfpenny each, you should do as I was doing last night. I was gluing my nose against the glass of a very small and dimly lit toy shop in one of the grayest and leanest of the streets of Battersea. But dim as was that square of light, it was filled, as a child once said to me, with all the colors God ever made. Those toys of the poor were like the children who buy them. They were all dirty, but they were all bright. For my part, I think brightness more important than cleanliness, since the first is of the soul and the second of the body. You must excuse me, I am a Democrat. I know I'm out of fashion in the modern world. As I looked at that palace of pygmy wonders, at small green omnibuses, at small blue elephants, at small black dolls, and small red Noah's arks, I must have fallen into some sort of unnatural trance. That lit shop window became like the brilliantly lit stage when one is watching some highly colored comedy. I forgot the gray houses and the grimy people behind me as one forgets the dark galleries and the dim crowds at a theater. It seemed as if the little objects behind the glass were small, not because they were toys, but because they were objects far away. The green omnibus was really a green omnibus, a green Bayswater omnibus passing across some huge desert on its ordinary way to Bayswater. The blue elephant was no longer blue with paint, he was blue with distance. The black doll was really a Negro relieved against passionate tropic foliage in the land where every weed is flaming. The red Noah's Ark was really the enormous ship of earthly salvation riding on the rain-swollen sea, red in the first morning of hope. Everyone, I suppose, knows such stunning instance of abstraction, such brilliant blanks in the mind. In such moments, one can see the face of one's own best friends as an unmeaning pattern of spectacles or mustaches. They are commonly marked by the two signs of the slowness of their growth and the suddenness of their termination. The return to real thinking is often as abrupt as bumping into a man. Very often, indeed in my case, it is bumping into a man. But in any case, the awakening is always emphatic, and generally speaking, it is always complete. Now, in this case, I did come back with a shock of sanity to the consciousness that I was, after all, only staring into a dingy little toy shop. But in some strange way, the mental cure did not seem to be final. There was still in my mind an unmanageable something that told me that I had strayed into some odd atmosphere, or that I had already done some odd thing. I felt as if I had worked a miracle or committed a sin. It was as if I had, at any rate, stepped across some border in the soul. To shake off this dangerous and dreamy sense, I went into the shop and tried to buy wooden soldiers. The man in the shop was very old and broken, with confused white hair covering his head and half his face, his hair so startlingly white that it looked almost artificial. Yet though he was senile and even sick, there was nothing of suffering in his eyes. He looked rather as if he were gradually falling asleep in a not unkindly decay. He gave me the wooden soldiers, but when I went to put down the money, he did not at first seem to see it. Then he blinked at it feebly, and then he pushed it feebly away. "No, no," he said vaguely, I never have. We are quite old-fashioned here." "Not taking money," I replied, "seems to me more like an uncommonly new fashion than an old one." "I never have," said the old man, blinking and blowing his nose. "I've always given presents. I'm too old to stop." "Good heavens," I said, "what can you mean? Why, you might be Father Christmas." "I am Father Christmas," he said apologetically, and blew his nose again. The lamps could not have been lighted yet in the street outside. At any rate, I could see nothing against the darkness but the shining shop window. There were no sounds or steps or voices in the street. I might have strayed into some new and sunless world. But something had cut the cords of common sense, and I could not feel even surprise except sleepily. Something made me say, "You look ill, Father Christmas." "I am dying," he said. I did not speak, and it was he who spoke again. "All the new people have left my shop. I cannot understand it. They seem to object to me on such curious and inconsistent sort of grounds, these scientific men and these innovators. They say that I give people superstitions and make them too visionary. They say I give people sausages and make them too coarse. They say my heavenly parts are too heavenly. They say my earthly parts are too earthly. I don't know what they want, I'm sure. How can heavenly things be too heavenly, or earthly things too earthly? How can one be too good or too jolly? I don't understand. But I understand one thing well enough. These modern people are living, and I am dead. You may be dead, I replied. You ought to know. But as for what they are doing, do not call it living. A silence fell suddenly between us, which I somehow expected to be unbroken. But it had not fallen for more than a few seconds when, in the utter stillness, I distinctly heard a very rapid step coming nearer and nearer along the street. The next moment a figure flung itself into the shop and stood framed in the doorway. He wore a large white hat tilted back as if in impatience. He had tight black old-fashioned pantaloons, a gaudy old-fashioned stock and waistcoat, and an old fantastic coat. He had large, wide-open, luminous eyes like those of an arresting actor. He had a pale, nervous face and a fringe of beard. He took in the shop and the old man in a look that seemed literally a flash, and uttered the exclamation of a man utterly staggered. "Good Lord," he cried out, "it can't be you. It isn't you. I came to ask where your grave was." "I'm not dead yet, Mr. Dickens," said the old gentleman with a feeble smile. "But I'm dying," he hastened to add reassuringly. "But dash it all, you were dying in my time," said Mr. Charles Dickens with animation, "and you don't look a day older." "I've felt like this for a long time," said Father Christmas. Mr. Dickens turned his back and put his head out the door into the darkness. "Dick!" he roared at the top of his voice. "He's still alive!" Another shadow darkened the doorway. A much larger and more full-blooded gentleman in an enormous periwig came in, fanning his flushed face with a military hat of the cut of Queen Anne. He carried his head well back, like a soldier, and his hot face had even a look of arrogance, which was suddenly contradicted by his eyes, which were literally as humble as a dog's. His sword made a great clatter as if the shop were too small for it. "Indeed," said Sir Richard Steele, "'tis a most prodigious matter, for the man was dying when I wrote about Sir Roger de Coverley in his Christmas Day." My senses were growing dimmer, and the room darker. It seemed to be filled with newcomers. "It hath ever been understood," said a burly man, who carried his head humorously and obstinately a little to one side, I think he was Ben Jonson, "it hath ever been understood, Consul Jacobo, under our King James and her late Majesty, that such good and hearty customs were fallen sick, and like to pass from the world. This greybeard was most assuredly no lustier when I knew him than now." And I also thought I heard a green-clad man like Robin Hood say in some mixed Norman French, "But I saw the man dying." "I've felt like this for a long time," said Father Christmas in his feeble way again. Mr. Charles Dickens suddenly leaned across to him. "Since when?" he asked. "Since you were born?" "Yes," said the old man, and sank shaking into a chair. "I have always been dying." Mr. Dickens took off his hat with a flourish, like a man calling a mob to rise. "I understand it now," he cried. "You will never die." And to conclude, another by G.K. Chesterton, The House of Christmas. There fared a mother driven forth out of an inn to roam. In the place where she was homeless, all men are at home. The crazy stable close at hand, with shaking timber and shifting sand, grew a stronger thing to abide and stand than the square stones of Rome. For men are homesick in their homes, and strangers under the sun, and they lay down their heads in a foreign land wherever the day is done. Here we have battle and blazing eyes, and chance and honor and high surprise, but our homes are under miraculous skies where the Yule tale was begun. A child in a foul stable where the beasts feed and foam, only where he was homeless are you and I at home. We have hands that fashion and heads that know, but our hearts we lost how long ago, in a place no chart nor ship can show under the sky's dome. This world is wild as an old wives' tale, and strange the plain things are. The earth is enough and the air is enough for our wonder and our war, but our rest is as far as the fire drake swings, and our peace is put in impossible things, where clashed and thundered unthinkable wings round an incredible star. To an open house in the evening home shall men come, to an older place than Eden and a taller town than Rome, to the end of the way of the wandering star, to the things that cannot be and that are, to the place where God was homeless and all men are at home. Merry Christmas.